I'm so upset. Oh my god. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9 to 5 schedule in general is crazy.
This cannot continue. This is a problem for this generation.
That's just wrong to me. To be honest, and Benny Johnson, this is kind of like a main media right wing guy, not right wing. He's fairly moderate, but he's kind of in between. But anyway, it's just kind of a big media source that's kind of bashing a Gen Z girl just because she's complaining about her wages. The fact that because she lives in a rural area, she has to travel for work, and that between the travel from work and everything like that, she doesn't have time to do anything. So let's break down. Let's find out if this girl really has good complaints here or not. So let's check out what this video is all about.
Working a basic 9 to 5 is causing Gen
Hold
Z.
on, let's start here. This is once again, this is Benny Johnson.
Working a basic 9 to 5 is causing Gen Z to have a mental breakdown.
But this is my first job, like my first 9 to 5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till like 6:15 earliest, and then like I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my god. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9 to 5 schedule in general is crazy.
This cannot continue. This is a problem for this generation.
Okay. So yeah, Benny here. I did a little bit of research into this already. So this is previously researched, and this is more about the breakdown and the premise that the conservatives, popular conservatives, and generally have, because I think they're just for some reason conservatives tell you to get informed, and keep in mind I am a little bit more libertarian than anything, but I'm somewhere in between conservative. So they tell you get educated about the finance, and then that's how you get the thing. And usually the way they do it is by going into the tax system and breaking down through building LLCs and everything like that, thinking that's available for everyone and thinking that everyone, yes, everyone can do an LLC, but no one has the funds and the capital to actually to proceed actually building empires that these people believe without having significant amount of cash to start with. Anyway, moving on. Let's get into it. So specifically, I used Grok, the Twitter AI, and I wanted to create charts about kind of what are the general expenses of each generation, and as far as how much they were paying, as far as like their federal taxes, state taxes, and this breaks it down right here. So I'm gonna focus on this, as can see. So this is Gen Z's expenses generally here. You see that their federal taxes are 15%, almost 16%, round up. The state taxes are 3.13%. I mean, at your car loan payments, and keep in mind all of these statistics are based on the average frugal person. So someone that saves a lot, that doesn't have high car payments, for example. This is calculated on a under $300 a month car loan payment, which is far lower than most Gen Z actually gets in their loan currently if they were to get more. So as you can see, this kind of breaks down what their fuel costs, their utilities, and everything like that. The federal taxes and everything like that are higher because there is medical costs and everything like that. Now, keep in mind, if you were to make $50,000 of income, you cannot qualify for any federal aids. You can't qualify for food stamps and everything like that. So all of your food expenses, everything like that, is going to be entirely on you. You don't have any government programs. The only programs you can actually get into is business pay based, like uh, debt relief, something like that, or a business loan that you can actually apply for, and that's where you can try to take out your taxes. But essentially, if you were just working a 9 to 5, someone that has a job and not a business, that's someone that's not. If you were just trying to go off a $50,000 per year income, Essentially, after the essential breakdown costs for a normal life, that's on a minimalist, you have um, most of your income goes directly into things that are made needed and just life costs. So this is like just a general breakdown and everything like that. So out of $50,000 income, 97.72% goes into things that are needed. So you are only left with essentially $94 per month after necessary cost and government programs. So that is your remainder amount that average Gen Z can actually go spend. Keep in mind, this does not have any owed debt. For example, if someone has a $2,000 credit card, that's another additional hundred or so dollars. Like a $5,000 debt, which is the average Gen Z has about a $6,000 debt. So the average of them would be paying about $220 per month of additionally per month just to pay off their high interest rate credit cards. So essentially, they're buried. They don't have really income as far as the generation for them to go to work. There is no benefit. However, if you were to make under $21,000 of income, you would qualify for food stamps. You qualify for things in government program, government aids that is directly paid by those that are making income somewhere between $50,000 between uh $40,000 because that's the vast majority of people in the United States. So you have to understand that Gen Z gets buried with all these costs and then they don't make enough to actually bury themselves out of any hole they may possibly have. If they have a medical expense, anything like that, you can absolutely bury them. As far as them working, it's not beneficial to them because they don't see any financial growth with the amount they're saving, with the amount that they have remaining. There is no potential for really to expand. You can't really, $94 per month is really not much you can do. It's not a huge investment. It would take you forever if you were saving $100 a month, 100% of what you have remaining. It would take you forever just to have a. Imagine trying to put a $350,000 home deposit with that. How long do you think it would take you to get 20 to 10%? It would take you forever, ages. There is no potential for future. Now I broke this down and I did the same calculations for the boomers, which is kind of breaks down what they made. So their total income was much less. So Boomer's income was $20,000 per year and not 50,000. Gen Z has a higher standard of starting point. However, whenever you break it down, Boomer's slightly less taxes, not significant. But whenever you start breaking down things that are mandatory now by the government, such as car insurance, which they didn't have those costs, it was entirely voluntary. And if you needed to save money, you could uninsure your vehicle, drive your vehicle, and you wouldn't go to jail and you wouldn't have any fees. So that's one thing that was added. As far as the rent was only 21% of the income. It was $350 per month on average. It was low cost. Their food was 5%. All of these costs that they have utilities. They didn't have internet. They didn't have things. And internet is mandatory. Internet and phone is a mandatory cost because if you don't have those two things, you often cannot do jobs. So you have to understand these are things that are important for these Gen Z kids to have. So as far as how you see the breakdown here with baby boomers, essentially after their deductions and everything like that, they were able to almost keep 40% of their incomes, averaging around 300 $634 per month in savings. That is an insane amount you could put away. You combine that with their low housing costs because their housing costs were not that high back then. You could buy a $60,000 $90,000 house. You can put and save for a house in about 4 months, and you'd be able to put down 20% and have pretty much a house that's and have low mortgages and everything. That keeps everything down as far as credit. As far as Gen X, they were slightly in a worse position than boomers. Not that slightly, actually. They were significantly worse off than the boomers, actually. So as far as the Generation X and their income, they made $30,000 per month, and their taxes were actually significantly higher than anyone else's. So they were probably the heaviest tax generation as far as the median income went. And as you can see, their breakdowns, they kind of had the in between to where their incomes wasn't great, but they were still able to save about 10% of their income after they paid for all of their kind of base necessities. leaving them with about $240. Let's call it disposable income. Millennials is, I think, the first generation that really saw this kind of trend of where they don't make enough income. So if you look at millennials here, their income was about $35,000 per year, as far as whenever they were in 2015, that time zone. And they had, this is where Social Security, all of these things, they have to pay for all these utility taxes, everything like that. They're essentially in a system that's perpetually making them pay into a system that um they're working. The government benefits more off the hour that the employee works. For example, what I mean is, um, if this person in Gen Z millennial, if they were to work for 1 hour and they made $17, they would get taxed, and essentially, 93 cents of that dollar goes to essential living things of what they made after the taxes and everything. Meanwhile, the government gets to spend about 30 cents on every dollar that you make. So it's a disproportionate amount that you work that the government benefits from, and the fact that Gen Z in general doesn't have the future proofing things that companies used to have. For example, you used to work for 40 hours a week for a company or under, and you would be able to get retirement, you would get pension and everything like that. Whereas Gen Z is expected to invest while into their future, they're expected to take away from their salary, right? Whereas before it was pension, they was provided by the companies themselves or the long-term employees. Gen Z doesn't have that benefit. Gen Z has to invest, but Gen Z doesn't have any money they can invest. With them only having 3% remaining of their income, how can you reinvest? And millennials, they were at 6% too, so they were fairly low in their cost to income, but it's still twice as much as Gen Z ever had. And for them, they did have in between 2016 and 2020, where car markets and car costs went down significantly, and their wage was good. Um, their wage did increase as far as what was the overall cost. And another thing that really helped out the millennials was crypto boom, and the fact that a lot of them had these investments at in crypto. So a lot of them did gain a lot of vast amount of wealth in a short period of time that actually helped a lot of millennials. And I think millennials over time now are will be able to buy some land. However, my biggest concern when it comes down to the future and how this kind of world that Gen Z is gonna face, really, my biggest concern, Gen Z's wages haven't grown significantly. So I did a little study here, and this was pretty much if I was saved for 4 months with my wages, whichever generation I lived in, how much would I be able to put down for what would I have saved, and how much would I put down? So for silent generation, this year 1970, right? Silent generation, in 4 months saving, they would have saved $813 of what was theirs, and that's about $6,400 $6,400 in today's money, essentially. So if you look at the the buying power of that, right? It breaks down right here with the potential purchases. Um, you have huge amount of your house down payment. That's 27%. You can pay off a car. You can have an emergency fund for 14 months of rent. That's a year, more than a year if you were to be unemployed that you could look for a job. So there's a lot of security that you could have with just 4 months of saving if you were to focus and be frugal. Baby boomers also had the same benefit. Their house payment was a little bit less, their used car payment and everything like that, but they were still able to afford. This is luxury money. Really, this is money for things that you don't necessarily need, for those computers and the VCRs. Generation X only had Generation X was the first generation that wasn't didn't have the same anywhere near buying power as their parents, which was the silent generation and the baby boomers essentially. So as far as Generation X, you can see the buying power change and what really happened because of the laws that initially happened between 70s, 80s, and 90s. with these different administrations that took place, where the policies became essentially corporate sponsorship and corporate lobbying became prominent in the United States. But it always has been. So regardless, Generation X, you can see their buying power, but they could still afford good cars, right? They still got a good down payment for a vehicle, and that's where you see the shift. Generation X was really into cars, and a lot of them purchased cars, which was a depreciating asset, but a lot of them were able to keep those things and hobbyists. Millennials, yeah, this is millennials and Gen Zs, and this is the depressed generation right here. This is the two generations that seem people don't realize why they're so negative about job employments and everything like that is because for their 40 hours of work and their blood, sweat, tears that they can put their time in any kind of employment, all they could really afford with their savings over 4 months is just a 3.6% or a 1.1%, which is you're not going to get anything like that. So you can't afford a house unless you save for at least 2 to 3, right? But the problem with that is this gets depleted with something called inflation. Inflation is high and everything like that. People say that inflation doesn't hurt the poor because they don't have much money and they don't lose money. But the problem is inflation kills the only little money that the poor people have and they're not able to develop and get over the hump. And Gen Z, as far as anyone that's making $50,000, is the poor class because they get so much of their money taken away into programs that are essential and they cannot avoid in their living costs that they're not able to really develop and proceed in the in this economy. So they refuse to participate because if they get at least if they stay get a part-time job, right? At least if they don't get paid the full amount or they're unemployed, they still get 21,000 or whatnot from the government. They get free food and they have free time. So it creates a system to where the people that work the 40 hours and are in these jobs that are demanding, they're working and they're not able to save. And these people that realize that they can't do it, that go into unemployment aspect of it and go into SNAP benefits, they can't advance themselves because if they go over a certain wage, then they can't qualify for the SNAP benefits. They can't qualify for the housing prices. I mean the housing Section 8 essentially. They can't qualify for these. So it's a cycle to where those people hate the middle class and they think middle class is the problem, and the middle class thinks that this problem is the lower class and people that are on snaps and everything like that when they realize they're both in the same shoes. Both of these poor classes cannot advance. They're both in a gridlock. The only people that can advance are the people, the top 5% of earners that can actually put away and invest into future property. They are doing so in a way. What people don't realize is Gen Z and baby boomers, right? Baby boomers typically are they're gonna happen, and this is what my biggest concern is, and I hope people realize that this is an issue because Gen Z's wage is so low. A lot of them will remain employed and everything like that they're not gonna have much power. What's gonna happen is when baby boomers, as they get older and they're gonna start passing away, baby boomers are gonna pass their inheritance down to problem is Gen Z. First of all, a lot of them will not be able to afford to pay the income tax, property taxes, inheritance taxes. A lot of them people, and this is what comes down to, like a lot of people think there's a conspiracy between BlackRock, Stateside, and Vanguard, because they're like 10% of the market, and a lot of these corporations like they're only 10% of the market. They're not even a huge player. They are 10% in essentially every company, everything. They're invested heavily into cities. They're huge, huge market. But basically, what's going to happen, if you guys remember the 2008 crisis, happened essentially people lost their homes and major corporations were bailed out. And when they were bailed out, what essentially happened was poor people ended up losing their homes. Meanwhile, these banks ended up just buying those homes at a discount. What's going to happen with baby boomers when they pass away and Gen Z inheriting, gaining the baby boomers' property is Gen Z is not going to be able to afford the property taxes. A lot of them will lose their properties and they will have to sell these properties because the supply is going to all of a sudden be high because Gen Z all of a sudden has to sell. Companies like Vanguard and everything will gain another 10%. Having 20% of a market, especially such thing as a residential market, gives you an essential monopoly control. And yeah, and this is where we're headed, where Gen Z is situationally. And I think I hope people kind of look into this, and I hope they realize that this is a bigger issue, and realize that this view right here, this mockery of this girl, that's basically, I mean, look at this.
Working a basic 9 to 5 is causing Gen Z to have a mental breakdown.
But this is my first job, like my first 9 to 5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till like 6:15 earliest, and then like I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my god. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9 to 5 schedule in general is crazy.
This cannot continue. This is a problem for this generation.
That's just wrong to me. Like the numbers, if you really look at this, um, numbers aren't there. The numbers aren't there, and Benny Johnson should be way better than that, than making that a post. I think if he was conservative, and I think a lot of conservatives have really lost what the values of conservatives are, which was our taxes should not be going to things and programs that are unnecessary. You have to realize that conservatives and people like Teddy Roosevelt, like um, John Adams, and other John, they were all very, very aware of the fact that central banking, all these issues are going to be prominently hurting the populace. And if we invest into foreign, all of this money, we invest into foreign affairs, we're going to end up robbing our own people to pay for those. And I think if you're conservative, you should realize that your values should realign them, should review what true conservatives in history have thought about taxation, and you should look into how these kids, how these Gen Z kids and millennials, what kind of situation they're in, how overtaxed and overburdened they are, that their incomes did not keep up, that they can't afford housing, they can't afford so many things, and yet you with 2.2 million followers decide to mock this poor girl. I think that's wrong.